to go and wreak havoc in a place called Ombachi and Bondo area. The elders of West Nile and Acholi had to meet much later and perform a ceremony called the bending of spears. We have in our culture as Africans, without needing any lecture from anybody else, to come to terms when we cause pain to each other. So the atrocities during Obote and Tito Okello was Acholinized. It was heaped. Now, you know my mother is from Isinjiro. So my uncles are now perceived to be the ones in power. Recently, my grandmother was buried in Ngarama at the age of 100. So now, every perceived ill of the state is nyankolenized. Whether it is done by an Acholi, Musoga, Uganda, it is Abanyankole. Abanubi. Abanubi was nomenclature. I hope I have persuaded you that we need to let the past run out. We don't need to bottle anything ourselves. And that is why, when the chief had the courage to stand up and say, where are the elders of Buganda, who should have denounced those who went to demonstrate outside the late Speaker Olanya's hospital, wishing him death? They should them ezosimpisa za Baganda. Line, because if you don't draw a line, you become complicit. Just like by not drawing the line on those things I've told you about, the second-hand Gomez's, even second-hand iron sheets. By not drawing the line, the horns continued growing. It is like a spider's web. It starts when it is breakable. But the point when you can no longer free yourself. Do you know a spider can tie you down? Because the strands will keep increasing. A nation must have the capacity to untie itself frequently so that the web does not become too strong. For that, the Chief Justice said, but he said, and he added, he said, those who were demonstrating while wearing the colors of a political party are a roadblock to the emergence of a future leader, because people will remember only that. Isn't that what I faced in Nakaseke? What was my crime? I did not choose my father. I did not choose my mother. I didn't fill an application form. But there we are. So if we don't want to do these things for ourselves, let's do it for the future. For the sake of my son Nicholas, for the sake of my son Nathan, and for the sake of the Bazukulu, our grandchildren. I believe the issues to be resolved are there. Let us start quiet consultations. Let us have a fair-minded approach to a national dialogue. When I speak about these occasions, on these occasions, people get very nervous because they think we are opening a Pandora's box. But what is the option? The option is to pretend. And I think pretending is not going to help. We need to start this difficult conversation. I believe that it is only by speaking freely about our past that we can reconcile. I've given you the example of the Kingdom of Buganda and the church. The king gets baptized. He weds in church. The children are baptized. The reconciliation starts. It can happen among us. If you think that we are not sitting on a time bomb, open Facebook, open Twitter. I never ever knew we would reach a point where people can celebrate the death of a person who is alive in the Republic of Uganda. So, we do believe we need a national dialogue for the sake of the future. We need your prayers. I hope those of you will also take time to reach out to me to share your thoughts freely with me about the work I've been given by the President of Uganda. I'm due to brief him soon before I go and address Parliament. Men and women in this country, we need to be in these processes. Don't let anybody shut you up. They are good people. And no matter how many agreements have been broken, we must continue believing it is better to agree than to disagree. There's been a lot of debate about the agreement that we signed as DP and NRM, but that's for another day. It is because people magnify mistrust. I don't want to say people do not betray each other. It happens. You know, in a certain village, one village had meat, another one had, which is our staple food. So they needed to exchange the food. So they met in the center where the two villages had a common, and they decided that the village that has millet should give some millet in exchange for meat. Now, each thinking that they were cleverer than the other, the one with meat put some stones underneath and meat on top. The ones with millet put sand underneath and millet on top. So they met and exchanged and smiled and shook hands. And of course they parted ways and each ran as fast as they could because they feared they would be discovered. Each one thought they had cheated, only to reach their village and find that and we have been cheated. So this is a word of warning to those who think they can cheat others. Don't think anybody has a monopoly of pulling a fast one. And in the case of that village. Moderator, I thank you most sincerely and apologize for exceeding my time. Please forgive me.
If you could repeat those graphics. Yeah, the dialogue has been sold, and I think if they are buyers, start preparing their checks. Dialogue and diplomacy
as said by Martin McGuinness, is the only guarantee of sustainable peace. Thank you very much, Honorable Norbert Mao, for your expose. And it's now my pleasure to call upon the Senior Commissioner of Police, an awardee of the Golden Medal from the country, but also Meritorious Award from Police, to come and make his comments on the subject. Most welcome.
Thank you so much, moderator. I wish to thank the presenter, Honorable Norbert Mao, for such a very educative presentation, but at the same time thank UMY for the skills that they impart to our senior officers in Uganda Police. They have done it before, they continue to do so, and we have a very, very good feedback from the officers that they have trained. I must say it's not easy to discuss a presentation of somebody who is an all-rounder. He's in the executive, he has been in the legislature, he has been, of course, being a lawyer in the judiciary, and now his ministry takes the judiciary. So basically, he had a wide spectrum, and it was a very rich discussion about the role of national dialogue in peace, security, and stability in the developing countries. But I must also discuss a few issues which will not be academic in nature, but based on what we have seen, what I've seen in my career of law enforcement and security, what we continue to see, and perhaps the futuristic perspective arising out of what he has discussed. I started by looking at the academia's role, especially the elite class, in his preamble. And indeed it's true, because the academia can influence the public out there, either positively or negatively. They listen. We have had incidents of youths, some youths, and they don't even read the manifestos which the academia and people make in the politics. They say, so and so has read on our behalf. Then they just wait for the instruction. So and so alagide. Therefore, the academia play a big role, and therefore in our teaching syllabus, or the syllabi, we need to, much as we have the content of a particular course that we are teaching, we need to embrace, as the minister rightly said, we need to embrace the ideological bit, so that we don't only teach the what. If I'm teaching engineering, if I'm teaching public administration, the what is well taught, but we need to go on, why are we teaching this? If you are an engineer, they are training you well, good civil works. But if I make roads and over 6 months they are potholes, shall we have investors to come here and have bumpy roads? Then they will go elsewhere. Therefore, it will have an impact on the national revenue. If I'm an agriculturalist and I do show the work, or I don't reach out to the farmers, shall we have production and therefore raw materials? So you can be a good agriculturalist, a good public administrator. If I don't manage the organization well, won't they hire? These days you see many Kenyans do a lot of work in the hotel industry. Shall we therefore access jobs? So you are teaching catering and hospitality management well. That is the what. But the why, and how therefore should we add ideology in the content that we teach is very important for the academia. I now rush through to, I also talked about, of course, the freedom of inquiry and freedom of education, which is very important. And for us in law enforcement and security, we think that is right, as the minister rightly said so. The question now here is, how do you deliver that inquiry through proper channels? should you burn a tire and then your inquiry is answered, or you should do petition Parliament or through parliamentarian, or reach out to the civil society organizations and then deliver your message to the powers that be. Can I reach out to the minister so that he delivers our views in the cabinet? So the question, therefore, we try to grapple with as law enforcement and security in this whole framework of freedom of inquiry is people seek for answers on the streets. And like Honorable Amau rightly told you, I think it's the next one I'm coming to. When I was in Kampala Metropolitan Police Command, that's Kampala and the neighboring districts, we would have a lot of quarrels on the phone, but he's a person who would listen. And therefore, that's why he would not go in for tire burning, but he would have his issues heard. Therefore, through dialogue, and that's now the third point I'm coming to, he talked about national dialogue, that he said it solves many issues, and is right. And to me, I would think we needed to have this discussion arising from the micro level. If you are a security commander in your area, do you discuss with the potential people who can cause insecurity in that area? Then when we inculcate those values, in the morning the professor talked about the values in society. If we calculate the values of dialoguing at micro level, in the sub-county, if you are to disturb the area sub-county, the youth, and then we uphold that as time goes on, and Honorable said, dialogue, of course, can take time, the hearing, and then you talk. Then the people, therefore, if they look at, they reach a time of discussing national priorities. They have already values embedded in them, some intrinsic values of dialogue in them. Then they can now tackle big issues that affect the country and the future of the nation. But we can start at micro and then build on to the macro level. And of course, accepting dialogue is also good enough within the framework of what he has said, that we need to have dialogue to solve issues. Sometimes in our security enforcement, we find people are not ready to have a dialogue. In the morning, actually, the president has talked about trust. And Honorable Mao has mentioned it too. We need to build trust in the people. So for me, whenever I would ring Honorable Mao, at that time, whenever I would ring and I see he has picked a phone, his phone, although we were going to quarrel, but that was good enough. Others don't even want to pick the phone. They are called for a meeting, they don't come for the dialogue. But simply picking enough, I would know that Honorable Mao is now going to talk. Then you quarrel a bit, sometimes you patrol, you seal the office, don't. But, and there is a point I'm going to come to, which Honorable Mao mentioned. I noted it somewhere, that things change over time. So a person I used to send a patrol vehicle to seal the office, sometimes bundle him there. Now I'm busy saluting him. So through dialogue, things change. He can even send me now, and I go running. Therefore, let us embrace a dialogue, because I think things change, as you rightly said. He has also said that dialogue is risk-free, and indeed it is. And I would even add on that it reduces the resource wastage. Because whenever we go out in the streets as law enforcement and as security, because we have our dialogue on the round table, then we go on the streets, the fighting begins. One thing leads to another. You injure somebody, then now the riot changes from the original reason to having injured their person. And one thing leads to another. And more risk coming. Then they vandalize shops. Yet the issue would have been sorted somewhere under a marquee like this one. So the minister said that dialogue is risk-free, and I agree with him. But also the resources we take in security, fuel to patrol, and the tear gas we throw, that money can go a lot in buying medicine in health center fees. and making roads. Therefore, dialogue can solve so many things, the fuel to move troops left and right. The minister talked about the relationship between the core and the stakeholders. He gave good examples of the territorial bit and how over time that core relates to the stakeholders. But I also add on and say that we can even have a dialogue with a core that may not be based on territory, because the minister has rightly given us good examples, but also a core which is based on things which are non-political. And then we start a dialogue from there. What is the future of our environment in the country? People have encroached on swamps. Then when we discuss at the national level, irrespective of the political divide, the global warming affects. We have issues of public health. We over-politicize everything in some of the developing countries, even in Uganda here. During the COVID time, the lockdown, I was the command of Kampala Metropolitan Police. And indeed, people were told, you go into crowds, COVID will spread fast. But again, people say, we shall go, we shall. They formed crowds, and you saw how wave 2 affected us. So I should be winding up. And the minister talked about the real questions that should be in the conversations. We need really to come out with the issues in national dialogue which cut across the religious, social, political, and then what are the interests of Uganda? After we have sorted the interests of Uganda, then we can go now in the details of you belong to this, you belong to the other, tribe, political party, which is also not necessary, because at this level we should be talking about Uganda. So the minister said that dialogue is a seed for possibilities, and I've given you examples that things happen through dialogue. He talked about perceived threats and why some people dodge dialogue. But like he gave us the examples that over time, societies can conform, and then there's reconciliation and healing. Therefore, the elite class, we need to do more and then reach out to the followers. Because how do the things that we dialogue in a boardroom, a 5-star, a good market like this one, how do they reach to a villager in Otuke, a certain young man in Chisenyi? So there is also that disconnect between the elite class and then those people for whom we in the dialogue. And as I conclude, the minister said, let us embrace national dialogue, reconciliation, and truth. Indeed, we need to stop perceiving everything in terms of ethnicity, where we even anchor an individual's action to the ethnicity that it belongs to. If I, as Kafera, has arrested a group of people, it does not mean that the Banachagwe have done so. It is so and so. But we continue to have the stereotype, and we anchor an individual action to the group. So we need to think as Ugandans. And then the very last, as I sit down, as the academia, let us continue to do more research on dialogue and its impact on peace, security, and stability. There is a Professor Assad is currently carrying out a research on why they don't riot. Because he showed me pictures whenever we have riots in these urban areas. They are youths whom you see their potential to riot, the way he's dressed, funny clothing. But again, he's just bypassing the rioters. He's walking about his business. So he's carrying out a research why they don't riot. He has been taking videos whenever there are riots. And there are some youths really you see the potential, but they don't take part. So that now maybe we start building on the values of those people. And then we have a national value of people who can sit down, talk, and dialogue. So I thank you so much, Honorable Norbert Mao. It was quite very informative. And I think we shall really take a lot of the advice that you have given in your paper. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Afende Afwende Kafuero. For our international audience, we are still considering the role of national dialogue in peace, security, stability in developing countries. But examples are now mainly drawn from the home examples, but we shall expand the discussion. Now, time is for Honorable David Pulko, DP. Who's been born and lived in a rather conflict-prone area of Karamoja, but has had an international perspective, having worked with UNICEF and Director General of External Security and the University Dome.
Therefore, I'll draw my examples from external. The role of national dialogue in peace and security. First of all, just put yourself in the land called Karamoja. Last Sunday, I went to Fort Lugard, finally, to see where this captain, not even a major, not even a general, took such a decision that put Karamoja under lockdown for 70 years. Nobody to go in, nobody to come out. And they monopolized and business there. They took everything they could take, and what they could not take, they buried underground and cemented. They chased the Zanzibarians, traders who were there. They chased the Abyssinians who were doing business there on the ivory and gold and, you know, those who were using cowrie shells and so forth. And then the Kitgum Conference of 1924, where they took a radical decision to push us back. The same clans in Lango, the same clans in Teso, in Palisa, in Osukuru Hills, in Tororo, you know, we were just discommunicated. The same clans in Masai in Tanzania, the same clans in Masai of Kenya, the same clans in Turkana of Kenya, the Samburu of Kenya, the Nyangatom of Ethiopia, the Topos of Sudan, the Bari speakers like the Kakwa, the Kuku, the Pojulu, the Nyangwara, all that Uganda that used to go up to Gondokoro, the Atekere people. We were all put under lockdown. In North Kenya, lockdown. In northeastern Uganda, lockdown. In South Sudan, they were locked down. Again, from the Ethiopia also, lockdown. And we were made to straddle across 4 countries. The core Ateker, those who were put under lockdown. Those who had escaped embraced development, education. And if you go deeper into those, you'll find that the injustices that were committed, no Karimojong was allowed to go beyond primary 6. I have a case of my own uncle, Joshua Akol, being the only Karimojong that reached the university and finished in 1963. If you don't know Joshua Akol, you know Doris Akol. You've interacted with that uncle of mine. He was smuggled out of Karamoja by Reverend Bwana Clark, a missionary, Church Missionary Society, taken to Ngora, because no Karimojong was allowed at the time to go beyond primary 6. Imagine if it was your village, your society. We just cried the other day for 1 or 2 years under lockdown. Those of us who were in lockdown for 70 years. You can see what it means. So you may say, what's wrong with this Karimojong? We're just good people like you. What is wrong is what was done to us. So are we a problem of Uganda, of this region, or we're people with a problem? So change your lenses through which you're looking at some of these problems. And that's why national dialogue is so important. Remove, if you're using a convex lens, by concave, what lens are you using? Change your lens and start to look at things from that perspective. When I was Director General of External Security, when the soldiers capture those kids of LRA, they say we have rescued abducted children. When they are killed, oh, we have killed a rebel. Now, actually, mother knows that this is not a rebel. He was going to the well, he was abducted. He was going to school, he was abducted. He was going to a market, he was abducted. He did not join voluntarily. Look at it from the perspective of the Acholi mother. is crying, his children who are being killed in the army, being killed in the local defense units, who are being again killed because Kony is using a different model that don't recruit normally. That's what the authors of that war said. That abduct. And when you abduct, let them kill their uncles and their parents so that they have no home to come back to, so that they are haunted, so that these orgies will go on forever and ever, so that the children will not come back home. They did not know that one day dialogue will bring these children home. Am I making sense? So, what is really security? Let's look at peace, the calmness. It's not necessarily the absence of war. There's a state of calm. But if those causative factors that brought that conflict in the first place remain unresolved, then that is not sustainable peace. It is just a temporary thing. If burst to ashes, how come in our country or in some countries a war begins again from where it has stopped? It doesn't give birth to ashes completely. So because of unresolved issues. So it's again through national dialogue that these issues get resolved. So is there a conflict in Uganda that we need a national dialogue? Is there a conflict over the idea of a state? I don't think we have that. Some people thought, oh, people in Rwenzori are fighting because they want to secede, or because people in West Nile used to belong to the Lado state. That state ended when the French military was dispatched to Fashoda in South Sudan and put their flag. And they want to connect to the French in Djibouti. They had even paid the King Menelik guns from Russia, from France, to support them. But the government, they wanted to put pressure on the Brits to return the Suez Canal, which they said they were just restoring a state of calm. And they stayed. And they wanted the railway from the Cape up to Cairo. So the French thought they would provoke them into this. So what ensued there was the French were kept at bay from Central Africa, the other side. All the rivers come to River Nile must belong to the British. And that's how they resolved the problem. And then King Leopold had to beg that at least leave the Lado state, where West Nile, Yei, Yambio, Garamba National Park in DRC used to belong. So they allowed him to keep it until he's alive, well, as long as he's alive. But 1 year after the agreement, he died. So then again, another formula had to come from Entebbe, the governor, and the governor in Khartoum. That's how they now brought West Nile into Uganda, but in exchange for the Bari speakers, the Kuku in Kajokeji, the Kakwa in Yei, the Pojulu, the Nyangwara, all the way up to Gondokoro. And again, that's 1926. Again, they gave Lake Rudolph, the Turkanas, all the way up to Naivasha, was given to Kenya. So we found ourselves in this state. Whether you go to Kisoro, you know how Kisoro came in, you know how Kabale lost part of the land, and how we gained from Kisoro. So who are we? So go back and read that Constitutional Commission report before our people were taken to Lancaster. It's very interesting reading. Very interesting reading. So let me come back home. I think a state of security should be about human security. It's not just about, it's not about bullet and metal. It's not about fiscal security. But security means freedom from want, freedom from anger, freedom from fiscal harm. It must be human security. So there's state security, there's regime security, and there's national security. These are three different animals. Regime security, those who are manning the government of the day. State security in terms of state pillars like parliament, like the army, the police, the institution of the state, the judiciary, the executive. And then you have national security, which is concerning everyone, common man and women. What's their aspiration? Even income insecurity. is insecurity. Even environmental insecurity is insecurity. Even poor health is insecurity. Even poverty is insecurity. So we need to have that broader view of security. So what's the role then of national dialogue in this? So because of shortness of time, there are 8 elements of power that needs to be employed at different components at every time. Assess the situation and therefore map out responses which will respond to this. And you continue adjusting because in order to consolidate stability, security. So when you succeed, that's exactly when you must now be cautious, because you're creating new problems. Success also brings new challenges. And therefore you must continue to fine-tune and adjust as you move on. You can use social power, how you organize society, how you unify society, how you get them away from the tribal leanings and ideologies of organizing. You can use economic power. You can use even this, look at this parish model. It's a measure, our government's projecting its power to deal with tare sita. Why did ordinary citizens support our army? They carried their guns, they gave intelligence, they gave the food, they protected them, they gave them shelter. What do you think citizens had in mind? What motivated them? They looked at these rebels, I think they have a future. I think if they take over power, they will use that power, they will organize society and come back and lift us from poverty. So I clap my hands when my government goes down to rescue now the people that's the meaning of Tare Sita. Not these celebrations we do here and brass band and so forth. That's the real Tare Sita. We must celebrate, yes. So when we go to dialogue, are we putting citizens, ordinary citizens, at the center of our decision making? Will they become better off or worse off? That should be the question. Political power, legal power, psycho-ops, psychological power. You can use force, military power, cultural, administrative. But let me go to, even just by realigning, realigning Uganda's foreign policy. We achieved so much without even using bullets. So, as a Director General of External Security, it was my job to know what kind of developments are happening in Rwanda or in Congo, in Kenya, or in Sudan, or the ring states, or in Africa, or in the world that influence us, that we need to influence. How do we strategize and position Uganda so that when others take their decisions, they take it in our favor? Whether the special envoy on Great Lakes is coming from America or from wherever, we have to position. Do we take an underlying position on this matter? How do we really position in order to get stability here? Of course, it was not my job to keep Mobutu in Congo or in DRC. If your mom did not tell you that you don't provoke people, you don't host other rebels, you don't destabilize others, or Bashir, for example. I'm talking this because this is history. I'm not talking about the current files. I'm giving you examples. So if, for example, the Arabs who in 1956, the British governor went for Christmas and never came back, said, I'm not coming back. And then the Arabs who were the majority in the civil service, in the army, took over. And then they start now to oppress our black brothers based on race, color, and based on religion. Now, if we are against apartheid because of one factor, race, how about these ones who are being oppressed based on color as well as religion? How could we stand like this? So what's Uganda's position on this matter? By just positioning. And so we had to come out with a strategy. There are extremists on this side, there are extremists on the other side, fundamentalists. So how do we mediate for peace to bring the moderates to sit together and you leave extremists on the other side so that you build a future based on moderates? So step number one, Garang goes for the whole Sudan, a confederation at the beginning leading to a united Sudan. A fallback position is independent South, independent North. Strategy, interest. You don't go to mediation without interest, without a strategy. Even as we go into this national dialogue, you have to go with a strategy. You have to go with what are the national interests this national dialogue is going to service. Because in government, there are also parochial interests. There are also selfish interests. I came across them in corridors of power. You meet them. They tell you, Mr. Prukol, I've been looking for you, or, you know, if the president asks you this, you tell him this. And I say, I have evidence here. You're wrong. You, Karimojong, what's wrong with you? But I'm a director general for external security. So you can see they make the president so vulnerable because the scene of their crime is far away from State House. And when they're with the president, they pretend. They tell the president everything he wants to hear. And he thinks is his best. Not until when he gets evidence and he sees, oh. So this is what I'm saying, that my point number 2 is that because of the parochial interest, because of the selfish interest, you know, there's goal displacement. You come to solve a problem, singing this and that, and you're really pro-people. People are called wananchi. I think this is a warning to me. I fully get the message. So let me leave that point and come to Luganda at a crossroad. Just visualize. I'm giving you what's not in the textbook. Here, powerful people. There, powerless. Here, comfortable. Here, uncomfortable. Imagine Uganda at a crossroad. We are going for national dialogue. They are the powerful and comfortable. They are here. They are not very many, but they are there. If you meet them in a supermarket, their wives, their children, they are pushing trolleys and trolleys. They are powerful. They take lunch in New York, I think breakfast in Jersey, and so forth. They have acquired a taste. But they are no longer moving on our roads here. They are stinkingly rich. Huge mansions, shock absorb, air-conditioned cars, even office. Teas flowing every 10 minutes in their offices. They are here. They are comfortable, but very powerful. And then you have those who are powerless and uncomfortable. Yes, sorry, they are powerless, but very comfortable. So you have an alliance of the comfortables. So at election time, this one brings their money, they give this one to get these who are powerless and very uncomfortable, the majority, to vote, to maintain this thing. And then on this side, there are those who are powerful. They are very uncomfortable with the direction the country is taking. They are shouting there and so forth. Will they make an alliance with the uncomfortable and the powerless in order to threaten this alliance here? These are suppliers. Okay? You come with any program like PDM, they change it immediately to per diem. Instead of PDM, and now they are being arrested in Gora because they are making. So a very good program, they use it to line their pockets. And to what do the poor have? What can they get from this rich, from this corrupt? Nothing. There's nothing they will benefit from. So let's go to the national dialogue. I don't know where you fall in this. I think let me stop here. But in the case of Burundi, we had to talk them out. The CNDD-FDD, who have been completely running away from the peace process in Arusha. So we had to get in Nkurunziza, we had to get his people of CNDD, brought them to Kampala, took them to Gulu, kept them here, brought the government in Bujumbura, and brought here, even in Buyoya, and so forth. Of course, as intelligence chief, you begin to see what is in Buyoya's brief. He wants to come and see Museveni. What's he going to talk with him? Then we say, oh, he wants Museveni to support him to stay longer. Then we tell Museveni, you see, this man is coming, but we want to use you as both carrot and stick. Because he doesn't want, his time has come to rotate. We go to Mandela, the same thing. And now, then once the Dar es Salaam Accord, the declaration, so the CNDD-FDD agrees to disarm, even a rebel group staying in the forest. And World Food Program doesn't want to supply them because they're keeping small guns. You convince them to give their big guns away. And the rebel group comes out and contests for election and wins election. That's an achievement. If our government could achieve that in Burundi, how about the Lusaka Accord in Congo? I've just told you about the agreement in South Sudan. Of course, the mighty UPDF. When we found they were not responding, hey, move on. Capueta falls, Torit falls, and we're going to Juba. Okay? Then now the vice president from Khartoum comes to talk with Garang in Naivasha. So, there, as I said, you use different elements of power, different proportions, and continue adjusting. Now, don't you think about time to go to another national dialogue? Imagine in Lancaster House, it was a dialogue. The Uganda delegates who went there, Buganda wanting independence before the rest of Uganda. Was it on the 8th? Uganda was to get its independence on the 9th. And then their delegates, the Muzungu is convinced to delay the independence of Karamoja. Can you imagine? We were not meant to be independent. And almost a fiscal fight came out in Lancaster. It's painful. So, I think if Honorable Mao has not sold the national dialogue to you, then please, there are many examples in our region where our own government has been involved. And today, you see DRC becoming part of East African community. How did we defeat those people who wanted to Congo? Ituri, Wamba, Diawamba, Bemba, the what? So we had to tell Katumba Wamala, the moment you get close to Bandar, okay, halt. You Kazini, halt. We are going to take this where? To Sun City. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I wish we had the whole day on these matters, but the point has been made. Public dialogue can be useful, and we have heard it from very exposed people in these matters, some of them presiding over them at the moment, like the Honorable Minister. It is time for you to raise questions directed to any of these on the panel, and then we can get their response. Thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon. Thanks for the good presentation relating to national dialogue. I'm Lukamba Muia. I'm from Northwest University, South Africa. My question is relating to the DRC. I know that in Bunagana, you know what is happening there. The rebel Bunagana. I don't know what kind of insight can you say about the rebel movement and the central and the government in Kinshasa. I'd like to hear your insight, please. I thank you.
Okay, I think that's this side. Yes.
Thank you very much. I am Patricia Achano Kiri, Deputy IGG. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the Honorable Minister, Honorable Norbert Mao, for opening our eyes to some of these aspects of dialogue and the significance of dialogue. There is a saying in Luganda, I am Manacholi by tribe, but I was born and raised here in Buganda. Amanyi go lujegere gali mu lugonvu yako. I did not see, okay, I may not have pronounced it very well. I think it is important for us to have or encourage humility on the side of parties, because the example you gave where opposition should be coming to have this dialogue and there are members who are saying, and so is there, then we cannot be part of this dialogue. Because peace and prosperity highly depends on interaction with others. It depends more on building bridges with others for civilization. So dialogue is very, very important. And it can change the skins, it can change emotions, and reduce tensions between characters. So I think humility should be propelled further. People should, they call it kumenyeka. Those of you who are married here, when conflicts in marriage, one party has got to, act weak and kumenyeka and say, I'm sorry because you committed this offense. I'm sorry on your behalf, but the truth is we have to have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next, Savio.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the presenters for really making it evident that national dialogue is not an option, but a must. My concern and question goes to Honorable Mao on what he alluded to in terms of connotations around dialogue. The connotations that have come with the past experiences on national dialogue. My question is, what is the role of trends in supporting the process of national dialogue? Do we dismiss trends from that process? What should be those aspects that we borrow? Is it a fundamental aspect to look at when we go into national dialogue, and also try to break some of the connotations that have come with it? I think it is important to understand how the two should relate. Trends of the past vis-a-vis the process of a national dialogue and the connotations around it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Two more, and then the professor here in front, Professor Kauza.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm really very happy to have met the Honorable Minister and the Commissioner of Police. I mean, this is a collection of people you wouldn't expect to come and dialogue within a conference like this. So in that, I congratulate you, UMI. It's quite an achievement. On this issue of national dialogue, I would want to, in other words, you have sold it to me totally. I am yet to write the check. But I would want to see whether I can add on something which I think is fundamental. Because I have followed the debate in the media and all these things. I think it is being sold as something that can be eventful or a series of events. What I would want to propose that it becomes a Ugandan way of doing things. Because today we might be concerned about what has happened in the past, and we would want to iron out the prejudices these events have created and create trust of being Ugandans. But there will be another issue. Society has issues. And as much as every society will always have issues, it is important that we adopt a Ugandan way of dealing with issues so that we don't use dialogue now because of what is being imposed on us by historical circumstances, but we also use dialogue tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow because of the various changes that are going to come up and the problems they will bring about and the search for their solutions. So, so that it doesn't become an event. And I think, Honorable Minister, now you could say that version also, so that it is seen as an approach in Uganda of discussing issues and challenges and coming up with solutions, rather than dealing with it as a new thing to deal with an old problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kauzia. Now, one more question, and then we shall have responses in the reverse order, beginning with Honorable Pulko, SP Kafuero, and then the Honorable Minister.
Okay, thanks very much, Professor Kugonza. Thank you, Honorable Minister Norbert Mao and other panelists. We are all you've shared with us. And I want to commend what Afande Kafero said, that also we have non-political dialogue. And if I allow me, I'll just quote one scripture, and that is Isaiah, chapter 1, verse 18, which says, "Come now, let's reason together. Though your sins are as red as scarlet, I'll turn them as white as snow." It is very, very important in all spheres that we should have dialogue. I agree with Honorable Norbert Mao, but my concern would be the sustainability of dialogue and, of course, of the outcome of dialogue. Dialogue, for it to be able to come up with sustainable outputs, outcomes, and impact, we need honesty, and not just mere honesty, but genuine honesty. So how can such genuine honesty be inculcated among the members or key stakeholders participating in the dialogue, so that at the end of the day, we have sustainable results from such a dialogue? Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. And lastly, yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Jennifer Aguti, and I would like to applaud the presenters, the panelists. And this is to my uncle, Pulko. I was impressed by the success that has been registered with the dialogue efforts pertaining to challenges outside our country. So being somebody who held a high-profile office, what could be some of the challenges that are making us fail to register significant progress in matters within our country, like the ones that were highlighted by Minister Mao? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we shall end there with questions. 1 second, 1 second. Yeah. You have a mic?
Thank you, the moderator. My name is Honorable Malik Kenneth, representing the people of Makindye West. Actually, I was not supposed to talk anything about this matter, but I want to thank the Honorable Norbert Mao for selling to me. Of course, I'm from the National Unity Platform, definitely. You have sold to me a very expensive debate. I will stop from there, but I thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I'm going to ask Honorable David Pulko. He's the Executive Director of African Leadership Institute and has been spearheading the parliamentary scorecard. Many of you would be familiar if you're from Uganda. And one time we tried to sell it in South Africa. I don't know what happened. When you are closing, say something about it. After which we have a friend, Moses Kafuero, and then the Honorable Minister. Then my co-chair will sum up. Thank you very much for being such a good audience.
Okay, let me say, what's the role of tribes? Of course, they are building blocks of this country called Uganda. But should we emphasize it, or we should reduce it just to mere symbols and identity, and we don't use it as an organizing ideology to influence how we employ people, how we run the state? You don't come and run Bakaramojong nationalism in the state of Uganda, or Banyankole nationalism, or Baganda nationalism. You must know that we are all, there are so many of us in this country, and therefore being sensitive to each other. Take a case, before the parliament could pass, of course the Maos and others were agitating for amnesty bill. We in security had to investigate. For me, it was to say, amnesty to who and why? So when we could bring rebels, people who have infiltrated into LRA in the night to Gulu and meet them in a house in Gulu in the night with the RDC, with General Saleh, and we get the rest of the army to face the other side. They don't know we have brought rebels into town. To understand, because our team is going to talk with their leaders in St. Egidio in Rome. We want to know, what do the fighters say, for example. And then you begin to know they're just asking basic things. You know, if we come out, will we be forgiven? If we come out, will we be free to join the army? If we come out, will our ranks be honored? If we come out, will we be given a chance to go back to school? If we come out, will there be a program for development of the North? These are basic things. You find that they're very honest. And then when you go to St. Egidio and you convince those people with the Amama Babasi and Betty Bigombe, then when they go to brief the commanders in Juba there, then they are arrested, the Obitas were arrested. So it drops. But then you craft now, through the legal means, how to respond to those issues. And you really relax tension, you really solve a problem through that amnesty law. Now, instead of looking at it as an actually problem, you look at it from that humanistic, from the national glasses, from the national interest. Now, about rebel movement in the case of Congo, my brothers and sisters, Congo would have been split into different pieces. But we just took a decision that a divided Congo is not good for Uganda. Just like a destabilized Kenya is not good for us. Or any destabilization in around our region, whether Rwanda or what, is not good for us. So you are then to support a way of unifying that Congo and come into terms with South Africa, with Zimbabwe, with Angola, and say, you be on that side, moderate those people, we will moderate people on this side, and they come together. And we crafted a formula, 4+1, the president and maybe 4 vice presidents, and then move them to move to their national elections, and Kabila is elected. So, because even for our oil in Lake Albert, if you put a Katusha on Reb Sengo's side, on the other side, you can shell those oil wells. We had to withdraw from everywhere else in Congo, but had to keep Kale Kaihura, David Muhozi in Ituri. Why? Until our work was done, because you don't want to be destabilized. Even when you say that River Similiki has shifted 1 kilometer inside Uganda because of the boulders from Mount Rwenzori. If you find oil tomorrow, what used to be part of Uganda, whose oil is that? So you come with a strategy, dialoguing, and go for production sharing agreements. We've had to look into that bottom of that Rift Valley, 4 kilometers. Is it tilting to our side? Is it tilting towards Congo side? Is there a chance our oil will be tapped on the other side? Fortunately, their side is rugged. Even for them to exploit their oil, they have to put the rigs, they have to put the infrastructure on our side. So they have no choice except to cooperate with us. I think, have I answered your questions?
Thank you so much. Actually, mine is to supplement on what Professor Kauja said, that we need to make dialogue part of the culture. It should be part of our DNA as countrymen and beyond. So I think that is very good, and we need to embrace it at micro level. People develop those values of dialogue, and then we can extend it to macro, so that they discuss even issues of strategic nature. So it's a good one that we keep it as culture, as part of the DNA. Thank you very much.
Moderator, there are some people who smuggled questions. In the spirit of transparency, I'll read the questions. One, why do we need a dialogue when we have a constitution? I think we need to realize that a constitution is a pact. It is general guidelines that creates a pact between the people and the government. Dialogue we are talking about is really about building the state. There's something we call the state. You may have seen the Kenyan swearing in. At that time, there was no government. The state took over. The state welcomed President Uhuru to say farewell, to have the guard of honor. The state welcomed the winner of the election, President Ruto, to take the oath. This dialogue is about a state-building project. The state should be something impersonal, which implements, it's like an ATM. That's the best example. It is programmed in such a way that if you have your card and you have money and you have a PIN, it will give you money. That is what the state should be. There should be nobody who can manipulate its relationship with you. Not even the bank manager can manipulate the relationship between the ATM machine and you. So, the purpose of the national dialogue, in my opinion, is to build a strong state that Ugandans can trust. Now, we also need a national dialogue because the Constitution provides for highly formal processes, but there are processes that can be informal. You realize that every time, okay, dialogue is about negotiating certain things. Take the example of a family. A husband and a wife have a marriage certificate. That's their contract. But don't they have constant dialogue, whether to buy a new house? These days, you also have to negotiate whether to have children. All that is part of the dialogue. And yet the Bible, by which people swear, says, you know, multiply and fill the earth. But you still negotiate. The second question was, are we going to change leadership at national level with a dialogue or based on the Constitution? I am the one who has said our Constitution needs a major renovation. The major renovation must be done by the owners of the house, and the dialogue is about that. I wish you had, actually these are the questions for the dialogue. The Constitution has been there since 1995. There are questions that are unanswered. Land, for instance. The Constitution says land belongs to the people. As vague as that. Then you have customary land, you have lease, you have Milo, you have freehold. How do we ensure that government takes charge of land use? Ownership is to the people, but land use is for the government. In my opinion, the government is asleep as far as determining land use. The government is busy complaining that, oh, land belongs to the people. You see, if the government says this land, this place here is for a road, there's nothing you can do about it. But it requires a strong state to do certain things. So this is all about state building, state capacity. And state capacity is not just about the police and the army wielding guns. State capacity is, of course, to impose the law, to effect the law. The state must have the capacity to say, this is what is going to happen, and it happens. And when I say the state, it is not a person as such. I grew up in the 70s. Our health inspector was called Chigundu. Chigundu was the state. If he found you playing at the tap, you are going to regret. School inspectors were very, very powerful people. When the school inspector is coming to school, even the headmaster, now you can imagine the district commissioner. So the dialogue is about respect for the law across the board. It is about our values. It's not even about politics as such, because I think we are putting too much in politics. When an old person enters a bus, values require that you, the youth, should stand up, because that's the only guarantee that someone will stand up for you when you are old. These are the things we need to talk about. Our culture. Morality. The list is endless. Responsibility. I am called the Minister of Justice. In reality, my job is to balance rights and responsibilities. What is your responsibility as a citizen? What are your rights? Those should be balanced. That is what the Minister of Justice should do. But here we have a culture of demanding mainly rights, but we don't talk about responsibilities. The other question was, what of other platforms that have been put in place to what are the platforms that have been put in place to collect people's views who cannot access me? People in Peche, Chana Mukaka, Kamuli. I am not going to be the chairman of the National Dialogue Commission. By virtue of my position, I'm disqualified. I will only propose names of people who can sit there. I think I'm one of the most accessible ministers. You can go to the ministry even now. You'll find the visitors' room full because I see people. It is important that I open up. And the issues people come up with range from delayed cases. Sometimes people think I'm like a lawyer who is supposed to give legal advice to them individually without them paying. Sometimes I have cases referred to me. So please, how do you push views? You can write letters to the editor. Let your views be known out there. You can wait when the public is invited to submit memoranda. You can submit your memoranda. I believe there will be so many panels down to sub-regional levels for the national dialogue, so that we talk about a number of things. There are things that are happening in our community that never used to happen. I grew up in the village. You could uproot your groundnuts and you leave the groundnuts to dry in the garden. Nobody steals it. Now you can't do it. It will be stolen. Everybody who builds a house must have a wall and a gate. I think in Gulu I may be the only person who doesn't have a wall and who doesn't have a gate. Everybody else has a gate and has walls. All that is part of the mentality. You now find serious gang crime, Northern Bypass and some, I understand even on Ginger Road, people throwing rocks at vehicles. So I want to draw a line between the role of the security to enforce law and order. Anybody who is going to steal, rob, rape, that one should meet with the full force of the state and should, if possible, stay alive to go and tell others that, you know, what I saw, you shouldn't see. Now, that is law and order. Me, I'm a law and order person. I generally don't like disorder. You can ask those who were in Namilyango College when I was head prefect. They will tell you about me. So, but Honorable Pulkol will correct me if I'm wrong. But I even think you are the one who told me. So you can correct yourself. You told me in one of our discussions on security, because me, I like learning, especially things I don't know. You told me that almost 80% of the security threats we face are of a non-military nature. So, war is now not military, actually. War is economic. War is science. So, and that is why what Afande Kafero is doing is very important. It is no longer about left, right. That may not guarantee security anymore. The best marksman or markswoman may not guarantee security. Because security is now in internet. You're going to set up your pipeline. You program it to unleash the heat at a particular time. Somebody will hack into it and your pipeline will be stuck. Tell me how the left-right goose match can deal with that. It will destroy the economy. Now, that is why whatever you are teaching there, I don't want to know. But it had better deal with that 80%, which is of a non-military nature. Now, the non-military nature of threats also include the population bulge. You know, the population pyramid now has a pot belly. The younger generation. I'm now at 55, I'm now in a minority. How do you deal with that population that needs jobs, that can easily be manipulated? How do you deal with those who go and outlive their visas in United Arab Emirates and cause a crisis? Now, those are the issues. You remember the famous conversation between Afande Kasinje and the young ladies who were threatening to go and do prostitution in Saudi Arabia or wherever. And Afande Kasinje was telling the lady that, you know, you'll really be mistreated. And the lady said, Afande, is it yours? It is even worse in Luganda. Afande, yiyo. Now tell me, how do you answer such a young person? Those are the issues we have to deal with. Now you can't tear gas unemployment, you can't tear gas poverty, you can't tear gas illiteracy, neither can you tear gas Ebola. So, but those are all security threats. And it requires a different kind of security apparatus. But as for dialogue, I agree with you, Professor, that we should have a dialogue which is self-supporting. We should be systematic. It should be embedded in the culture. But there should also be the dialogue which is based on problems which come. So in other words, you have a fire brigade truck because you know the possibility of a fire is there. But you do not wait until a fire has started. Say, okay, let's procure. I believe in dialogue, not because I'm in the government now, and not because I signed an agreement. I started this even when I was a little boy. You should have read something my brother wrote about the Mao you don't know. One day we had goats. We were little teenagers, and we forgot to take the goats to eat. So our father decided that we should not eat also. And we were really hungry. So being the eldest in the family, my brothers gathered around me and said, now go and have dialogue. Now these are the reasons why there are people who imagining having dialogue with them gives you goosebumps. So I understand when some people say, how do we talk to President Museveni? Because their mind is full of certain images of what they think is going to happen. But what do you lose by trying? So at the age of about 13, I found my father newspapers, and I called his attention, and I was about to run, but then I realized that I was representing other people. Then I said, you know, Dad, we are very sorry we never took the goats for eating, but we are children and you shouldn't punish us by starving us. We will never do it again. You give us another punishment. And when I gained courage, I even threatened that, you know, if you don't, you pass starvation, next time we'll report you to the police. So my brothers remembered because they were outside the window listening to how I was going to be sent running. But eventually we were given amnesty. So when my brother from Makindye West imagines going to talk to the general of the national resistance movement, maybe he has his own ideas, but what do you lose by trying? Second example, 1990, I was guild president. The university was in total chaos. We had a strike. Our speaker was in hospital. You know the story of Speaker Olanya. He was in and he got a very bad beating. Kicks, gun butts, whatever. They had to remove his spleen. He lived his entire life on antibiotics for the whole of his life, because it is the spleen which fights infections. So if you don't have a spleen, basically it means you're basically on permanent battle with all the germs that naturally reside inside you. 2 students dead, so many injured, nobody is going to classes. In the spirit of dialogue, I picked a phone. I went to the Vice Chancellor's office and requested a telephone. Which number did I call? State House. Had I ever called it in my life? None. But I asked myself, what do I lose? Let them abuse me if they want. So I called, a lady picked it up and asked me my name. I said, this is Norbert Mao. Who are you? President of Makerere Students Guild. What do you want? I want to speak to the president of Uganda. Why? He's the chancellor of Makerere University, and we have problems. We need to talk. That lady is now the executive director of Uganda National Roads Authority. At that time, she was called Allen Kakuyu. She's now Allen Kajina. She arranged the meeting between me and 5 others. And we went to State House in Entebbe to speak with the president. for over 3 hours. I realize the president has one quality which we can take advantage of: persuadability. I don't know whether persuadability on all things, but I can say there's persuadability. We persuaded him to change government policy. And the Minister of Education then, Amanya Mushega, had vowed that if the president reversed government policy, he was going to resign. Of course, he didn't resign. But the president changed. The other example was the question on amending the constitution to deny certain categories of people bail. Some people were threatening, we are going to do this and that. How do you deny bail? As a DP, decided to frame the message differently. We decided to defend judicial discretion on bail. And we argued that bail is part of the right to a fair trial, because you get bail so that you go and organize your defense, not to interfere with witnesses. Why does the government want to be the one to gather evidence, and you should not gather evidence? What sort of justice is that? We were able to propose that the Chief Justice should be the one to enact practice directions, in other words, regulations to govern bail, because the president was saying victims' rights are not being seen. So, that persuadability can only work when you insist. I never get tired of saying I was among the most booed MPs ever in Uganda. You know what it means to stand up to the microphone and before you even open your mouth, woo, woo, rebel collaborator, coin, and they even scratched it on my car, coin. You see, but you must have something driving you, something you believe in for its own sake. So each time I was bored, I was imagining. So if you are being tempted to abandon talking to President Museveni, imagine Libya, imagine Yemen. Look at those options, because there are those who are saying he is irrelevant. Our job must be to remove him at all costs, even if Uganda drowns in the process. That all energies must be in removing one man. Some of us are saying the dialogue is about creating that process. Many of the good things that we admire, the British, by the way, don't have a constitution. They have had a change, they have had a transition. You saw it. One prime minister who had been lodging in number 10 for about 44 days came and gave her last speech, then went and said bye to the king. Another one is going to be prime minister. Nobody has elected him, just his colleagues. But the British people accept it. What can Ugandans accept? So, to deal with some of the threats which we misperceive as security threats, government should deliver better services. Why can't you go to process a land title and then you are taken through the whole process and you are told this is what you have to pay, this is what we need, let's look at your documents. We estimate that your title will be ready in this number of days. Come back. In Uganda, you'll get a call every day with another thing which is required. You have forgotten this one. You have forgotten this one. We need that. We used to go for passport. You find people lining up. They even claim they have clients. There's the government which processes passport. Then there are self-appointed passport officers who wait for you, that they are clients. At police stations, there are even people who position themselves that they negotiate bond. And they take advantage of Ugandans. So you, the senior police officer, you will sign a document not knowing that you have bought somebody breakfast, lunch, and supper. And for us, of course, we'll stand here and denounce you for corruption. So you need to position your cameras so that you see your real clients, namely the people who are coming for service, not those who are ever there. If you see somebody is ever in the police station compound, what are you waiting for? There is that offense for idle and disorderly. Start from your compound. There are many people who are idle and disorderly in the compound of the police station. And they tell lies. Even the president, there are people who have been conned. You have read in the papers. So-called investors. We can let you meet the president. Give us this amount of money. You give the money, you never hear. So somebody will go to meet the president, and maybe now legitimately, and he will be treating the president with some disrespect, because he says, this man has eaten my money. You never know, it could be happening even to ministers. So this topic of service delivery is very important. If we can only improve service delivery by 50%, most of the frustration will go down. The so-called PADM, Parish Development Model. So I agree with what the Deputy Inspector of Government said. We need to die a little. Humility is important among government officers in some of the very, very simple things. The government said when you fail to pay medical bills, they should not keep the dead body. 2 weeks ago, I was fighting with the Nakasero Hospital. They were holding on to a dead body. So are we turning hospitals into Lufula or what? So that we start selling meat, human flesh. So that is what most Ugandans would not even be bothered. Why are the youth struggling to go to parliament? Why is my young brother there wanting to go to parliament? Because wherever he is, probably he feels like, the government is not working for him. So I don't know how you feel now that you are there. I can tell you, for me, I believe that we should serve the country better. What my sister said requires a lot of humility. And I want to thank this university, UMI, for opening its doors to the rest of us. Because that in itself is an act of humility. And allowing us to come and lecture you professors, some of us, we never studied seriously. I studied in the first year. Second and third year, I was a part-time student. I just scraped through. I didn't fail, but definitely I should have done much better. I now had to, of course I went on to study other things, but humility is very important. What my sister wanted to say is, amanyi golu jegere, bwe bugomvu bwalwo. Of course, with our Nilotic tongue, sometimes we don't get it right. But it means the strength of a chain is its flexibility. And that one requires a lot of humility. So, if we did a survey, which is the most arrogant institution in Uganda, I think we need something we must call arrogance index. Which is the most arrogant institution in Uganda today? I don't know which one would rank very, very high. But I want to say Uganda has a chance, and okay, I've been reminded there's this Bunagana. I think we'll talk about it one-to-one. It is a rather sensitive issue because remember, Uganda is in a very tough neighborhood. We are a small country. Sudan, Rwanda, Congo, Kenya, and of course Ethiopia and Somalia and so on. I'm proud to be in a country which is known to be very tough, at least on one thing, terrorism. You know, terrorists will always avoid Uganda. And you, the police officers and UPDF officers who are here, who rarely get praised for anything, let me use this opportunity to thank you for keeping Uganda safe from terrorism. Of course, they say Ebola and Corona, but do you people know how other countries have a problem with the issue of terrorism? Terrorists fear to mess with Uganda because they know not only will we deal with you here, but we'll also follow you where you are. We will also follow you where you are, whether you are in Baidoa, whether you are in Mogadishu, and deal with you. And it is important that we have a strong military, because we cannot afford to be having a weak military, given the kind of neighborhood in which we are. Pulkol told me that there's something called strategic depth. I remember your private lectures to me, that Uganda has a what? A very low strategic depth. So in other words, you must not allow anybody to enter your border. And he even told me another thing which I can disclose here. He says that if you have a small country, sometimes you have to sleep outside, even if you are sleeping in the neighbor's compound. So you must get the cooperation of the neighbor to say, for the security of my house, I must sleep in your compound. I think that is the stance. So dialogue also has limits, because I don't see how we can have dialogue with Al-Shabaab. That one is a very hard paper. We may not have dialogue with Al-Shabaab. You cannot have dialogue with the terrorists. But the police have always told me they have dialogue with pickpockets, phone thieves. I understand you people know the phone thieves, and you even call them. that the moment somebody reports and says, at Old Bata or New Park, then you call somebody and you say, you people, bring that phone. Now, that to me is what community policing is about. You know us, because we are your people, the good ones, the bad ones, and so on. That kind of dialogue is good, and it always translates into plea bargaining in criminal cases. If you invite the Chief Justice here next time, he will tell you that thousands of cases have been resolved by suspects who are guilty and who have been persuaded that they will get a lighter sentence. Remember the Kanyamunyu case? Kanyamunyu was going to go in for life. Now he's going to come out after about 2 years, because he had already spent about 3 years. Why? Because of our traditional processes. In places where culture is very strong, in Acholi there is a mixture, which if you are telling the truth, if you drink it, it won't harm you. If you are telling a lie, you drink it, you'll die. So, in a criminal case, a live one, in a Gulu High Court session, presided over by Justice Mary Maitum. This is a real case. The aggrieved person told the judge, we are going to settle this matter from home. And she asked how? That we are going to do that mixture. If this fellow really did not commit the offense, he will drink it and he will not die. The fellow said, I want to change my plea. I'm guilty. So, this is a topic which has ramifications at national, local. It affects the criminal justice system. It affects very many aspects. I thank you again for the opportunity to come and speak to you. I will be following over Zoom. I understand you are on Zoom. So while I will be taking a little break from my meetings the other side, I'll be following with a lot of interest. And I hope we will get a chance to read the report. And I hope you'll share with us also the contacts of the very good resource persons who you have invited here, because we need many of them for the work that we are trying to do in the ministry. For members of civil society, I want to tell you I have come in as a bridge builder. I know we have been having bad exchange between government and civil society, and I have advised my colleagues in government to moderate their language about civil society. But I also have to ask you to moderate your language also. Don't speak the language of us, the politicians. When you find an NGO calling the government a junta, then it stops being an NGO. Leave that language to us. We are the ones who should talk like that. You speak your nice English, not things like junta and so on and so forth. There are other better ways to express yourselves so you don't cross the line. So let us do those two things and the relationship will improve. Don't make my work difficult. It is a delicate time.
Thank you so much, our guest speakers. I just have to make a few words. One, to appreciate all the statements you've made and to say that we have learned a lot from your presentations. I didn't want you to stop in terms of the experiences you've shared, but in the interest of time, we are going to call it on for now, and I want to thank you. May we give them a round of applause. And thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Adrian. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you, panelists.
Can we discuss peacefully?
Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, it was such a nice topic to discuss, and of course, it had to consume part of our time. Nonetheless, we want to make few adjustments, and we apologize on the issue of time. Those of you who have been here several times, you know, we manage our time. But it was worth it. It's not about timekeeping, but time management, putting important things in the available moment. And we want to thank the panel for that wonderful job. Ladies and gentlemen, in the concluding remarks, Honorable Norbert Mao talked about the war. We are now moving to the next set of war. We may call it the worst war that we're experiencing at global level. It's the war of corruption. And I want to say we are moving to the next session, the last one, and after that we shall go for our tea. We have a topic on anti-corruption strategies, lessons from Uganda, presented by the Deputy Inspector General of Government, Dr. Patricia Achan Okiria, but the topic will be discussed by Reverend Jasper Tumuhimbi Sempirirwe, but allow me to introduce and welcome the chair of the session of this panel discussion, Professor Costa Hofisi. Professor Costa Hofisi is a professor of public management and governance from the University of Northwest in South Africa. He's published a number of articles. He supervised a number of PhDs. Those who have the program in the conference bag, you read much more about Professor Costa Hofisi. I want to say we, as UMI, we are proud of him because he has about 5 products, doctoral products, as he supervises, and I can proudly say, including myself. And it is my honor and privilege to receive him here to chair this session. The co-chair is Dr. Michael Chiwanuka. Dr. Michael Chiwanuka is a senior lecturer in public administration and management from Uganda Management Institute, and kindly come and receive your people. I'll ask Professor Costa Hofisi to immediately introduce the presenter.
Thank you, Dr. Adrian. Good afternoon, colleagues. For the sake of time, I think we really have to to do a good job in terms of keeping our time. So I don't want to waste your time. Straight away, I just want to introduce our speaker this afternoon. We are not going to have, as per the program, Honorable, I'm sorry, I have to apologize in advance if I fail to pronounce the names which are here. We are not going to have Honorable Betty Kamia, who is the Inspector General of Government. Yes. But the presenter this afternoon is going to be Dr. Patricia Achan Okeria. I hope that's the correct pronunciation. She is the Deputy Inspector General of Government, and prior to this position, she served as a commission member of the Uganda Human Rights Commission. Dr. Patricia also served as a policy and legal advisor with the Ministry of Works and Transport, where she provided the ministers with legal advice on all departmental issues in the Ministry of Works and Transport. She worked also as an acting director legal services in the Directorate of Ethics and Integrity under the Office of the President. In addition, she is an associate consultant at the Uganda Management Institute, where she is teaching PhD students. She is also an external examiner at the University of Pretoria. She has authored several publications in several areas. She is enrolled as an advocate of the Supreme Court of Uganda, a member of the Uganda Law Society and the East African Law Society and Uganda Christian Lawyers Fraternity, where she currently serves as the Vice President. She has a long CV. Allow me to end there. May we give a round of applause as she is coming to the stage. And I also have a discussant that I'm going to introduce, who is Dr. Jasper Himbise. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Is the CEO of a company called Church Commissioners Holding Company. May we give him a round of applause as he's coming to the podium. So Dr. Patricia is going to present on anti-corruption strategies, lessons from Uganda. And a presentation is supposed to be about 20 minutes. So may I encourage the presenter and the discussant to please stick to the time. You know, for the sake of our time, we are running very late. Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Patricia. May we give another round of applause?
Thank you very much, Professor Costa. I'm humbled with that introduction. With the authority granted unto me, I would like to request everybody to stand up, stand up, stand up. Stand up on your foot. And we're going to sing a song which I believe you all know. You can just say hello to your neighbor while we are singing that song. We are marching in the light of God. We are marching in the light of God. Please don't let me sing it alone. Marching in the light of God. We are marching in the light of God. We are marching. We are marching. We are marching in the light of God. We are dancing in the light of God. We are dancing in the light of God. Dance, dance. We are dancing in the light of God. We are dancing in the light of God. We are dancing, we are dancing, we are dancing in the light of God. And we are sitting in the light of God. 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 We are sitting, we are sitting, we are sitting in the light of God. In the interest of time, I will not go into so much detail or academic, because my paper is prepared actually for review for publication, and you will read the details. But I'll be discussing the anti-corruption strategies and sharing some of the lessons from Uganda with a perspective from the Inspectorate of Government. And this topic is rather sensitive, and it is a problem to this country because corruption affects service delivery and impacts negatively on government. So it's a very, very significant topic for us to discuss. Previously, in one of my presentations, or a number of presentations, I have described corruption as worse than COVID. Though they are closely related, corruption is actually related to COVID because they both have the ability to squeeze life out of the nation. And because they both have the ability to squeeze life out of the nation, it makes corruption very, very dangerous for the nation. In terms of characteristics, they both mutate. You saw COVID mutating from, I don't know, Omicron to Delta to something else. Corruption also mutates. We used to look at it from the perspective of bribery only. Today we have illicit enrichment, we have money laundering, we have abuse of office, and several other characteristics and how corruption manifests itself. So my paper will basically touch on, for the overview, I'll look at the background, I'll look at the anti-corruption strategies, I'll look at the legal framework, types of corruption. I'll touch briefly on the national implementing bodies, the Interagency Forum in the fight against corruption and their contribution, and I'll concentrate more and lay emphasis on the strategies and lessons and conclude with challenges. So corruption, if we don't deal with it, it is capable of destroying the nation. For purposes of introduction, corruption is one of the major obstacles that undermines socioeconomic development in developing economies, and Uganda is inclusive. In Uganda, although substantive investments have been made to combat corruption, it continues to impose a wide-ranging cost on the society because corruption leads, first of all, to trust in government. It leads to poor social service delivery, it leads to poor infrastructure, it delays project implementation, it results into low investments, and even loss of lives. I will not touch deep into the definition because there is no universal definition for corruption, but it's generally agreed that corruption is the legal use of public power by a public official for private gain. For purposes of sources, the World Bank defines corruption simply as the misuse of public office for private gain. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime also looks at corruption and touches on its characteristics, and it basically touches on whether it's for private or public gain, but it's committed by officials using their role to procure gain for themselves or somebody else. So when you look at corruption, basically, it is also defined in our domestic law, in the Anti-Corruption Act and in the IG Act, and it touches on the characteristics again by saying it is related to embezzlement, bribery, nepotism, influence peddling, theft of government funds or assets, fraud, forgery, to mention but a few. So corruption manifests itself in many ways. So in terms of types of corruption, corruption can be categorized basically in two types. That is the grand and the petty corruption. Significant number of cases of grand corruption have emerged in the recent years. This is now what we call the high-profile cases of corruption. It has emerged in the recent years, leading to significant losses of public funds through mishandled procurements and outright. And then we have petty corruption, on the other hand, which is associated to low morale, indiscipline among poorly paid civil servants, such as the court clerks, the police officers, those you see at the roadsides and in their offices, and others. So on the other hand, grand corruption is normally rooted right from the planning and implementation of the plans by the technocrats. It is syndicated corruption, where people actually sit and plan and have a racket. Like in procurement, you can have the accounting officer, the procurement officer, the user department, the evaluation committee. They all agree and say, well, there is this money. We can do this and that, and then they implement the grand corruption. Financial pressure on politicians to recover heavy election expenses. This is now when you see politicians are also involved. It leads them into political corruption, witness in unending probes, and passing of biased laws. So when you look at corruption in Uganda, what is the cost of corruption in our country? The Inspectorate of Government in 2021 conducted a study, and in that study we established that corruption actually results into loss of, the cost of corruption is about 9 trillion annually in overt and covert corruption. Overt and covert corruption. Covert corruption by these people who are supposed to be, for instance, the teachers are supposed to be in class and they're not going to class, but at the end of the month they are all paid as if they were teaching and fulfilling their mandate as required by law. So we have the overt and covert corruption, and that basically comes to 9.1. Corruption costs were grounded according to the various activities which basically where corruption occurs, like government revenues, user fees and natural resources, public service provision, this is the healthcare, education, welfare and security, government regulations, environmental protection, and permits, certificates, where people have to pay a bribe before they can get a service from a government department or agency. Now, government procurement and budgeting, you find that there are issues of government subsidies from government to companies, citizens, the entire economy, and even political institutions at large. So this study basically revealed that we lose approximately 9 trillion per year, both in overt and covert corruption, and these findings have greatly shaped or informed our anti-corruption strategies in the Inspectorate of Government. We have come up with a preventive strategy. Preventive, not that we are not going to continue chasing, continue arresting, investigating and prosecuting cases of corruption, but we want to take the fight against corruption to the ordinary person out there. So these findings basically shaped our strategy, and we have committed ourselves to ensure that we take and involve every citizen. We encourage everybody to come out and report cases of corruption. We have a brief background about the Inspectorate of Government and the 10-point program and our responsibility in the 10-point program. The spirit behind the 10-point program was basically to tackle the problems that existed then. There was poverty, rampant corruption, bloated and highly inefficient bureaucracy, heavy debt, insecurity, lack of fiscal discipline, and to mention but a few. So you realize that the Inspectorate of Government was then established at that time to tackle two major issues: to deal with the promotion and protection of human rights and elimination of corruption and abuse of office. But as time went along, you find that in 1995, when the Constitution was promulgated, the IG was given a mandate, a constitutional mandate, which clothed it with the constitutional power to execute its mandate, but also separated the two prolonged mandate by establishment of a human rights body to handle the human rights issues, and then the governance and corruption issues were left to the Inspectorate of Government. So it is basically an institution established to work towards the elimination of corruption and management of abuse of office, and also the functions of the National Ombudsman. It's entrenched within Chapter 13 of the National Constitution with a mandate, powers and functions, and other relevant powers that are well stipulated within the law. I will skip the functions in the interest of time, but unpack them just briefly. How do we implement this broad mandate in the Inspectorate of Government? We have got the implementation of the anti-corruption function. Here we basically conduct investigations of cases of corruption in MDAs, in local government, and as a result of the investigations, the offenders and suspects may be arrested, they may be prosecuted in courts of law, disciplinary action may be recommended to the action officers, funds lost or embezzled are recovered and taken to the Asset Recovery Fund, and assets may be confiscated where investigations reveal that assets were acquired through corrupt means. And then we have got the Ombudsman function. Here the IG basically mediates, it acts as a mediator between the citizen and the ministry, department, or agency or local government in the promotion of good governance. And through the Ombudsman interventions, the IG has created a medium for dialogue. We have just been talking about dialogue. We have created a medium for dialogue between the various stakeholders to discuss the key policies where they play a very significant role, and to advance equal and fair delivery of services to the public, and also to channel citizens' voice and to hold government accountable to its citizens. We also undertake systemic interventions in MDAs and local government to take necessary measure for the detection and prevention of corruption in public office. Then under the enforcement of the Leadership Code of Conduct, this is very important because it's to do with the declaration of assets, the declaration of liabilities, and so on. The IG is mandated to enforce the Leadership Code of Conduct as a method of ensuring that public servants live within their well-known sources of income, within the bounds of their legitimate income, but also do not misuse or get to abuse their authority to take what is left in their charge for personal gain. So the Leadership Code Act basically provides a minimum standard of behavior for leaders, and it also requires all specified leaders to declare their incomes, assets, and liability to the IG, and the code prohibits conduct that is likely to compromise the honesty, impartiality, and integrity of the leaders. The law also imposes penalties on leaders who breach this code, and now we have the Leadership Code Tribunal. Anybody in breach, we sanction the matter to the Leadership Code Tribunal for prosecution. So it's very important that as leaders, we take note of this, and when the declaration period comes, it's coming next March, we ensure that we all duly declare our assets and liability. We have the prevention, education, and advocacy. Under here, we basically create awareness, and we create partnership and collaborative efforts with various stakeholders, and we create awareness and educational programs, and carry out youth and young persons engagements, and also implement the STAC the transparency, accountability, and anti-corruption component of governance to ensure that we have got people who monitor our projects at the grassroots, and then where they find gaps, they can raise a red flag and report to the IG. And these community monitoring groups has been very, very helpful as a strategy in the IG. We have powers and operation, we have powers to investigate or cause investigations, we have powers to arrest or cause arrest, and then we also prosecute in respect of cases involving corruption, abuse of office or authority. And in order to carry out our mandate, we issue orders and directives compelling various institutions to implement these orders or instructions as a result of our findings. Sometimes we just prepare reports with recommendations, with instructions to accounting officers to implement. And the accounting officers who just put this aside and say, what will they do? But we have started descending, we have started utilizing these powers and causing arrests of these accounting officers who defy our orders. Now, under strategies, we have a robust legal framework. We have an institutional and legal framework. We have got the Constitution, like I clearly indicated, as a strategy, and the Constitution put in place. Under the Constitution being the mother law, a number of laws have emanated from there, and we have the IG Act, Leadership Code Act, the Anti-Corruption Act, and a number of laws which basically we rely on in implementing mandate. We also have the Anti-Money Laundering Act, the Penal Code Act, and the Whistleblower Protection Act. And then we also do have policies like the Zero Tolerance to Corruption policy, the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, which operates within the Zero Tolerance to Corruption policy. When you look at the Zero Tolerance to Corruption policy, it basically comes up with, it first of all states that corruption approaches and strategies should be reoriented, should be refocused, and it should be a strategy which encourages partnerships across the board, but most importantly, to empower citizens to be able to demand for accountability and transparency. So that is the Zero Tolerance to Corruption strategy. We have got the international, we also have the international legal framework, like the UN Convention Against Corruption, and the promulgation of this Convention Against Corruption enabled us to widen our mandate in the bid to domesticate what is in the UN Covenant Against Corruption. And now this has taken us to strategies like coming up with the Asset Recovery Unit, where we have a fully constituted unit to handle issues to do with recovery of proceeds of corruption. Then we also now have the mutual legal assistance, where in case someone goes out and takes away the assets, stolen assets from here, we can use the mutual legal assistance within the East African community and African anti-corruption associations authorities to get those people to book. The convention basically covers 5 key areas. It has got the prevention strategy as well, preventive measures, criminalization and law enforcement, international cooperation, asset recovery, and technical assistance. And from this, we have put in place the Asset Recovery Unit, and then we're using the mutual legal assistance and cooperation with the other regional networks we have. So we also have, other than the UN Convention Against Corruption, we have got the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption, that is the Maputo Convention, and then we have the revised draft East African Community Protocol on Preventing and Combating Corruption. We have got the institutional framework. The Inspectorate of Government is the lead anti-corruption agency, and then we have got the Anti-Corruption Court, which basically the judiciary established as a specialized division of the High Court to hear and adjudicate corruption matters. Then within the institutional framework, we have got the Office of the DPP with its mandate, we have got the Uganda Police Force, and these are all members of the Interagency Forum in the fight against corruption. We have a multi-agency approach where we have even Parliament
and Parliament plays a very, very significant role. We have got the Directorate for Ethics and Integrity, and the Directorate for Ethics and Integrity, where I have worked before, is mandated to cooperate with anti-corruption, to promote cooperation and coordination with all these other agencies in the fight against corruption. So we have got that multi-agency approach, the State House Anti-Corruption Unit, the Office of the Auditor General, the PPDA, and so on and so forth. Financial Intelligence Authority, Leadership Code Tribunal, and they all play a significant part in the fight against corruption. So when we talk about the strategies, we have a number of anti-corruption strategies. We have the anti-corruption asset recovery approach, and this one I have already talked about. We have an asset recovery unit, an asset recovery fund, where all the proceeds of corruption we recover basically goes into that fund, and the unit is responsible for following up to ensure that such monies. We also have a dual approach. The combined application of both enforcement and preventive strategy. Like we said, we are going to continue with enforcement. We investigate, prosecute cases of corruption, but we also want to take the war against corruption to the ordinary citizens. And this leads us to the citizens' engagement in the fight against corruption. Citizens' engagement is under strengthening transparency, accountability, and anti-corruption. We realize that when we take the war to the citizens, then it will have much more impact, because the citizens are actually the victims of corruption at the end of the day. So they need to own the war against corruption. The ordinary citizen is a person who goes to hospital and finds that the drugs are stolen. So it's the citizen who should own the war against corruption and be able to report these cases and blow the whistles and report these cases to us for action. So that is about the citizens' engagement. I talked about transparency, accountability, and anti-corruption, where we have the community monitoring groups within the grassroots, and they have played a very significant role by reporting cases, providing information. They monitor government projects at the grassroots levels, and they're able to bring this to our attention. We have a strategic collaboration with citizens, with a civil society organization. This is very important because we realize that the war against corruption requires partnerships and strategic alliances, because it's not only the IG which should be involved. It needs a holistic approach, and like I mentioned, there are a number of anti-corruption agencies, but we also have the civil society, and we have partnership with the civil society organizations to jointly conduct citizen empowerment programs. And they are very, very significant, especially as within the community. They have empowered the community monitoring groups. They have helped in training them and skilling them to be able to do their work. And then we have the verification of assets. I did talk about declarations, but when these declarations are received, we do verification just to ascertain that this person, what he declared, is it commensurate to his, did he declare truthfully or he declared untruthfully? So the IG is able to successfully prosecute and recover certain assets that have been illicitly acquired by public officers by use of this approach. In the process of verification, sometimes we discover assets which were not declared. So who does those assets belong to? So we get to engage with the officials, we get to engage with the leadership, and sometimes when they're not able to explain, these assets come under the management of the IG. And indeed, we do have some assets where we're receiving rent. Soon we may have to dispose them off by auctioning them publicly, because the owners failed to own up and prove that they were able to acquire those assets rightfully. The Leadership Code Tribunal is one of the strategies we have, notably worthy from the amendment of the establishment of the Leadership Code, the Leadership Code Act. Thank you. We have the Leadership Code Tribunal, which basically deals with cases of leaders who are in breach of the Leadership Code Act. Then we use also the information networks. Uganda is part of a number of regional bodies and anti-corruption agencies such as ARINEA. This is the Asset Recovery Interagency Network for East Africa, and basically this helps in ensuring that we are able to use the mutual legal assistance. Then we have partnerships, strong partnerships and collaboration with other government institutions. This I have already mentioned. The Interagency Forum in the fight against corruption, the ministries, departments and agencies as outlined therein. We have also been rebuilding integrity as a strategy to anti-corruption. We have the ambassadors of integrity, and the First Lady is a champion of the National Ambassadors of Integrity. And then when they were reading my profile, they mentioned that I'm a vice president of Uganda Christian Lawyers Fraternity. Within the Uganda Christian Lawyers Fraternity, we are now laying strategies to partner closely with government agencies, with the Office of the IG, because we have been organizing the National Integrity Campaign for the youth. We have had national youth conventions, and matters of integrity, matters of values comprehensively discussed with the youth. So we have the Anti-Corruption Youth Challenge. We organize debates, we organize poetry on anti-corruption, and get to spread our wings, working with universities, working with institutions of learning. We recently launched the Young People's Handbook on Transparency, Accountability, and Anti-Corruption, because, like I said earlier, we want to take the fight against corruption to the people, and we want to launch deeper. So every other day we are thinking about new innovative challenges, new innovative ways in dealing with corruption. As I conclude, I have been told I have 2 minutes. We have got challenges, like we have lack of institutional capacity across many interagency organizations in the fight against corruption. A lot of work is hampered by lack of technical capacity of the staff, because corruption is getting more sophisticated. The corrupt actually sit and plan. So we need to think about skilling, we need to think about training, we need to think about investing more in the anti-corruption agencies so that they can do very good investigations and do good technical work, especially in dealing with cases of corruption. Then we have lack of specialization in handling corruption cases. Although the IG recently established a Directorate of Special Investigations, we still have challenges, especially because corruption is getting more intricate and getting a bit complicated. So we need specialized skills in dealing with some cases. Like sometimes you need a handwriting expert, you need someone who is an expert in forensic investigations, and so on and so forth. We have a challenge of inadequate resources. We have lack of witness protection law. Of course, this law is in the offing, but it has taken rather too long. So we need to fast track it and ensure that we have this law in place, because when we don't have the witness protection law, it becomes difficult when we have whistleblowers coming to report cases and we do not have any legal mechanism to take care of them, then it becomes difficult to have them actually protected. Then we also lack the non-conviction based asset recovery, which is meant to confiscate assets. We're able to arrest the person, but we can't proceed against the property. So we need the non-conviction based asset recovery law in order to be able to proceed that way. Then victims such as banks, embassies, and religious organizations do not want to expose occurrences of corruption in their institutions for fear of losing customers, and generally fear for exposing their internal dealings. So we urge them normally to cooperate, we urge them to come out, we urge them to come out to name and shame. Petty corruption, on the other hand, is associated with low morale and indiscipline among the poor, so we still encourage the people to come out and report these cases. So corruption in Uganda, as I conclude, the government of Uganda has committed itself greatly to the fight against corruption by establishing a robust legal and police and institutional framework, and has continued to come up with new innovative ways and strategies to combat corruption. In the last financial year, for anti-corruption agencies, the budget was increased, and then the IG also, we had our budget increased by 20%, and with this, I believe we will go a long way in implementing most of these strategies, and I believe you will see the report either from the fourth estate or from other sources, and you will begin feeling that the IG is actually moving. And as the IG, we are sure to win the war against corruption, because it's about mindset change. It's about a collective effort of everybody. And we are directing immense effort towards empowering the citizens to demand for transparency, accountability, but also to be able to detect and report and shun cases of corruption. So our strategy has even empowered citizens to be able to solve some corruption cases at the grassroots level. And with this, I believe they will begin to appreciate and own the war against corruption. Otherwise, thank you very much for your attention. May God bless you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patricia. May we give you another round of applause? That was a very insightful presentation. I won't waste your time. I will straight away invite the discussant, who is Reverend Jasper. Before he comes, I'm told that Reverend will say, as I conclude, probably maybe for about 5 times. So when he comes here, towards the end, when you hear him saying, as I conclude, you must know that probably he will say that for about 5 times. But don't worry, I'm going to be watching our time carefully. You have 10 minutes for your...
Thank you, Doctor. And he will be surprised. And I pray that he will be surprised. Jasper Tumuhimbisi is the name. And I will directly go to my proposals as strategies to fight corruption, because I have been in this. I was working with Dr. Adrian whenever in IGG, but I was the head of Anti-Corruption Coalition Uganda, and part of the NACS, National Anti-Corruption Strategy. That's my product with the late SHAME, plus the zero tolerance policy. So, and as we are developing it, we were really thinking that surely, shall we continue developing laws and laws, creating institutions, and then corruption still increases. So the question is there corruption in Uganda? Yes. So in other words, we are miserably corrupt. And it is indicated in all newspapers, plus all international indices. Have there been, institutions and legal frameworks made? Yes. In analysis, Uganda is after Nigeria in terms of legal and institutional framework. Perfect. In fact, when we are taking, we are about close to 95% in terms of legal and institutional frameworks to fight corruption. So, what is the problem? And that's what I'm going to address, the strategies of fighting corruption. And these are out of what I think should be done, but also what I have read. And now a strategy is a plan or a guideline or a policy to sort out something. And in anti-corruption, there are 2 approaches. Number 1 is the preventive approach. Then number 2 is responsive approach. Uganda, we are good at responding. Meaning, we can do a post-mortem, but somebody has already done what? Has already died. So I will dwell more on preventive approaches rather than responsive, because responsive, the end result, the outcome is clear. And so, what are the preventive approaches? Now, preventive approach is something to deal with the root cause. Now, even the definition of corruption in Uganda is a problem. Why? Because it focuses on the private public sector. Private sector, religious sector, which I also work for, somehow, okay, the new anti-corruption law you can arrest, but generally the focus is on private. Secondly, the root cause is also on the types of corruption, grand versus petty. Pity is basically survive. I mean, I get money so that I survive. But we have systemic corruption where even if you put an angel, he will end up as a demon. And therefore, we must put preventive mechanisms in order for us to sort out the big problem of corruption. And so, preventive mechanisms require, proper programming, long-term solutions rather than short-term, and also it will require maximizing effectiveness of, for example, ICT, and I will come to it. So prevention is more about deterring and refusing people to get an opportunity to be corrupt. In 2013, I was in South Sudan, and I had applied for my driving permit. So, and I was helping South Sudan to establish an anti-corruption commission. And I applied for my permit. 8 months later, when I came back, the permit was nowhere. I went to Old Kampala, where I paid from, and the permit had never reached Face Technologies, which is near us. And that time I penned down, I normally write my thoughts. I penned down the Uganda Snail Authority, an authority which would take my permit from Old Kampala to Chambogo. And I calculated if a snail carried my permit, it would have arrived surely in Chambogo after 8 months. And after that, I got a call from the Commissioner General's office, and then they established a new mechanism where you pay and then go to pick your permit. So, the first preventive mechanism is use of ICT. In other words, I don't have to meet a person in order for me to pay for a permit, to pay for a passport, to pay for all other necessities. And the use of ICT, therefore, will also relate to payment through banks or through the, mobile money, other systems which prevent people from meeting. So that's the first preventive mechanism I propose. Secondly, empowering the justice and law order sector. Now, of course, I have worked with my colleagues in police. I worked with Benevia Adrian in IGG. The tragedy is you have no capacity, technical and also professional, to especially investigate modern crimes. I mean, technically speaking, computer forensics, then also these other types of financial forensics, the capacity to attract me to police or even to IGG, with all due respect, is not there. Why? Because you cannot pay me, you have no capacity to pay me, but also you can't retain me. If you pay me for 1 year, the next year I will leave. And so many of us actually left, especially the cohort of 1990s, simply because it was frustrating that you have no capacity. There is a big case, but you do not put mechanism for me to do what? To investigate those cases. Then another preventive mechanism is also making corruption risky, because many people are actually investing in corruption. You invest through a contract, you don't do it, you are so sure that even if they arrested you, you use the very own money to do what? To prevent you going to prison. But even if you go to prison, a Ugandan for 2 billion, they rather go and serve 5 years and come and do what? Get their corruption proceedings, and business will continue as usual. Another preventive mechanism is to invest in social sectors. Now, social sectors means education, health, water and sanitation, and also things like rural roads, so that you facilitate that village person to live a life that is normal. You facilitate a person to get a passport without what? Without coming to line up. Recently, I was talking to my colleague in the passport, and that's another strategy, making policies that are pro-poor, meaning I'm a private person, help me license my company, help me register without passing through hell. So I was talking to one of my friends in the passport office. Somebody goes on TV and declares that from 28th of April, old passports are not in use. Do you know what happened there? Whether express passport or not, it was a disaster. Now I read recently, 2 weeks ago, they were using Ukraine and the Russia war as the reason why they can't print passports. But I was telling him this policy will facilitate corruption. Why? If I am sick, if I have a study visa, I have time, I'm time bound. And therefore, this will facilitate what? Corruption. I will call either my relative or get, this gatekeeper, they call them gatekeepers, to facilitate that. So policies which Uganda makes, and I'm telling you, policies generally facilitate what? Corruption. Then we also need internal policies and codes. Internal policies and codes includes like, I read the name of Kafero. That's an internal policy. So that it prevents a bit because he knows that somebody is watching. Then we have internal declarations, internal declaration of assets. Then moral revolution, she talked about it. Then we should look at releases, all releases. Actually, when we're in IGG, we would look at all releases beyond a certain what? Beyond a certain amount. And we just get interested in where this money is going. And I can assure you, there was prevention. Because again, when we got responsive, we have already lost. Finally, and as I end, responsive mechanisms. If something has already happened, yes, we need to respond. But the purpose of response is to reduce the harm that is caused to the perpetrator, but also support the witness, also support the whistleblower. And therefore, we need a Witness Protection Act. We also need whistleblower to be implemented. I know it is there, but I can assure you, implementation is also a bit unresponsive. Then provide also appropriate consequences for the perpetrator. If somebody is arrested for corruption, it is not about TVs that we have arrested 10. Actually, I want to call Benebiabo. I was thinking about it when I was coming. That people who are arrested on TV normally conviction. Why? Because ultimately it is not because of real corruption, it is perception. Engineer, Kawo, you arrest. Where is the evidence? Nothing. And so we are now dealing with politics of corruption, that we have arrested this, but how many convictions do we have? And as I conclude, therefore, 4 suggestions. Number 1, please empower the people. Go down, empower the people. If it is PDM, tell people that this money have arrived, so let them fight for their money. Secondly, let the government respond. We have actually a government which doesn't respond to people's needs. You talk, 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 shout, 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 then they will keep quiet. Make politics risky, especially when it concerns corruption. Number 3, finally, access to information. Give information to the villages, not newspapers. Who reads the newspapers? Send that PDM information to the lowest village, a school, a church, or a mosque, so that people are able to access, this is the amount, it is supposed to do this. Finally, remember the context which we are operating in. Uganda is a corrupt nation. So as you put strategies, deal with that other aspect. May God bless you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Jasper and Dr. Patricia. Members, I just request you to join me to give them another befitting round of applause for such insightful delivery, especially in line with corruption. You see, the last conference we had at UMI, the second international conference, it described corruption as a crime of humanity. Now today, Dr. Patricia, Deputy Ageesigika, has just equated corruption to COVID-19. She said corruption not only as bad as corruption-19 to humanity, but also it is mutating. Now, I think, David and Jasper, that's another tragedy for corruption. You said the tragedy is about capacity to address today. Now, Dr. Patricia is saying it mutates. Now, mutating implies that we are now pursuing an extending problem. Corruption is a problem which actually is changing face. As we pursue it, it also changes face. That's another tragedy. So I want to thank the two so much for such very insightful delivery. Professor Kauzia in the morning when he was framing the thrust for this conference, he said, as we change, we try to transform public service, we should focus on values, identifying and pursuing values. Now, unfortunately, like Dr. Prosper and Dr. Patricia have implied, corruption has a capacity to disrupt the values, to distort and disrupt the values. It can even change the value orders. Professor Kauzia said, if the political values go wrong, everything else has gone wrong. But we have just heard that corruption has a capacity to actually make all values wrong, which is actually the tragedy with us. But having heard from them, I think we must appreciate what has been presented by Dr. Patricia, the endeavors by the Office of Ageesigika in trying to come up and pursuing different anti-corruption endeavors, the perseverance within the circumstances. And also, we have heard from Dr. Jasper that if we are going to address corruption today, we must use innovative systems that are focusing on what works, focusing on technology, responsiveness, among others. So it is at that backdrop that I now welcome you to come and put this debate, because corruption is something which is actually with us all. We know where it is, and we are part and parcel of it. So this is now our time. We can have a few, we cannot have many because of time, but still we can have some question, comments, or even any other supplements on what has been submitted by the two eminent presenters. I don't know now whether our rapporteur is going there at once again to move there. But I said, could you come help us? Yes, Isabie, you can come and help us. The mics are here. And JP. So there are some hands at the back. Yes, there is a hand at the back. That's one. Any other comment? Yes, there is another one, the Honorable MP of Machine West, and then Professor Kauzia here. So we can have those three. Professor Kauzia here. So we can start with Dr. Nwagaba.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chwanka, and the discussants, Dr. Patricia and Dr. Reverend Jesper. Thank you very much for that elaborate discussion on corruption. I still wanted to strongly believe that if we are to have good governance and service delivery, we need to come up with the feasible strategies that have to do away with corruption. And they normally say charity begins at home. The challenge is that corruption, we look at it from the angle of the national level, but it stems from home. So if we can come up with strategies, and one of them, those of us who still come from the spiritual school of thought, it says, bring up a child in the fear of God. When he's old, he can never depart from it. And in the morning when I talked about the fear of God, it was not well understood, but ideally, the fear of God simply means to have the love of God and have the love of people, where there is support for one another and care for one another.
Thank you,
From my personal experience,
Dr. Nwagaba, you wanted to continue? I thought this has been carried big.
Yeah, my personal experience as I finish this is that honestly, by the grace of God, I'm not corrupt. When it comes to financial corruption, I'm not corrupt. Simply because I have the love of God. So my comment to Reverend Dr. Jasper What do you have to say about that? Don't you think it's a strong strategy? If we can inculcate our children and even institutions the element of the love of God, which I call the fear of God, it can help so much to combat corruption.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Dr.
you very
Nwagala.
much.
He's speaking to the spiritual approach to address corruption. Honorable
Thank you so
Member of
much,
Parliament.
moderator. For record, again, I'm Honorable Male Kenneth, Lord Councillor representing Makindye West at Kampala Capital City Authority. And by virtue, I'm a member of this governing council of this great institute. So it will be impersonation. My Honorable MP, Alan Sewanyana, is behind bars. Thank you so much. This goes to, my question goes to my constitutional law lecturer, Dr. Patricia, and it's going to be a quick one, sir. I wanted your indulgence. I wanted you to talk about the post-effects of your delayed processes in fighting corruption. I'll give you an example. There is a matter before you, that is Salama Road. But when you look at the post-effects, when that project was halted, so many patients are being ferried to that hospital there in Kirudu, but the fact are, few reach that hospital alive. So there are post-effects on halting on that project that I want you to talk about in reference to others. The second one is a quick one. The IGG talked about the big fish in Orange Slippery, and I also wanted to understand what did the IGG meant when she said that big fish are always slippery. When they are trying to catch them, they are always running away from them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Honorable. And the last question comes from Professor Gambuuze.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the speakers. I just wanted to add to create some doubt and probably make this problem more complicated than has been presented. You see, corruption is multidimensional, both in causes and in solutions. And so to approach it from a purely administrative and legalistic way, I think across the board all over the world has been proved necessary but insufficient. This is one of my subjects of research, and one thing that has mixed me up as I do research in certain countries, including Uganda, I was going to say especially Uganda, is this issue of impunity. You see, when you use the legal judicial approach, you assume that people will be afraid and stop. But when you put that into a context where impunity is abundant, then it doesn't matter what legal measures you put in place. If I can give you an example, you see there are cars parked out there. Some of them have alarms. I can just go in there and drive off with a car and an alarm in and still take it, an alarm irrespective. You know that there are cases where people steal money or other government property, and they steal and people know they have stolen and then nothing happens. When you have got a situation like that, that's what I call impunity. Then most legalistic measures don't work. Because I would say, I take it, so you do what? In the history of Uganda, you know, there have been cases where people bring their lorry and park it there and order you to park your property on the lorry and drive it. Now, how do you deal with a thief like that? Do you use legal means? It's the same thing as stealing government money when in your head you have a mentality which says, let me take it, what can you do to me? That's impunity. It cannot be solved by law. It cannot be solved by providing information. Maybe if we talk about a social revolution or maybe a political revolution that can cut short that impunity among some government officials. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Kawuzia. Now, I think we shall start. The presenters, allow them to respond from their comfort. We shall start with Dr. Jasper. Dr. Jasper, you can respond to any of the questions that you think.
Thank you so much.
And then thereafter,
as a disclaimer,
just a minute.
I'm on my thesis.
Yeah, just a minute. Thereafter, Dr. Parusha will also respond from there. Okay. And then after that, my colleague, Professor Costa, will round up this.
Yeah, thank you so much. As a disclaimer, I'm on my thesis for doctorate, so I'm not yet there. But I think through your declarations, I will soon be. So, I mean, two things. One is about moral revolution as one of the things we must do. For example, my children are aware that I hate corruption, and they also hate it. So it is a consequence of what I taught them from childhood. We meet a traffic officer, and with a child of 5 years, he will tell him or her that daddy doesn't pay what? A bribe. If it is prison, take him quickly. So in a way, there is a cost to that. A cost, meaning you must be aware that when you fail to do certain things, then the consequences of not doing them will actually affect you. If it is travel, you may fail to travel because of that. So there is that cost, and many of us should be willing to pay it. And on the love of God, I think also there is a tragedy that many of us are stealing in the name of what? In the name of God. In fact, you will find that even the kleptocrats, the corrupt ones, are seated in front of church and mosques, and they are the ones we promote when we are preaching. I have never seen, or I haven't seen yet, or heard a preacher saying that if you are corrupt, don't put in the basket. Well, that's what we should be able to drive to, but the challenge is also that corruption is within churches and mosques, and we are selling our land. Others are, taking away ships, vehicles, and what. So, in other words, we are dealing with a bigger challenge than what we would call the love of God, if the love of God is agape, the one I know. Finally, the causes and effects. And I agree with you. A mud fish thrives in mud. When you make clean water, the vulture will get it and eat it. So, impunity is thriving because systems and processes in this country facilitate that. That when I steal 2 billion, it is okay, even if people demonstrate. Actually, they won't even demonstrate, especially if they come from my home area. So, the other one will hear about it, and then impunity will continue. And therefore, I say, we must rise up, slowly by slowly. Again, it is a long-term goal. It can't be 2 years. Even a political revolution, I mean, we have changed the politicians, but sometimes it is from bad to worse. And expecting demons to sing a song of angels is of expectation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, my fellow panelists and moderator. I'll begin by commenting on the whistleblower. I happen to be one of the authors of the whistleblower protection law. My colleague, Dr. Jasper, said the law is not working very well. Indeed, during our investigations, we realized that the people who come out to be whistleblowers are the ones who are aggrieved by a deal that has gone bad. So in most cases, the whistleblowers are not genuine whistleblowers. So when we launch deeper, you discover that the person who came in as a whistleblower is actually not a whistleblower, he's a suspect, and we turn him around to maybe be a witness in the case. So we have those challenges. Train a child in the way of the Lord, and when he grows, he doesn't depart from it. It all starts from home. If we purpose to inculcate in our children values right from home, then when they go to school, they will be exemplary. When they eventually start working, they will have this mindset change and will be able to deal with corruption. If you look at our country today, you find that most of the parents have abdicated the roles of parenting to the mobile phones or gadgets or to the housemaids. So we need to go back to the drawing board and begin to teach our children some of these values. I'll give you an example of my own son. I have a son in SMAC in Senior 3. The other time he came home and he was among the last in his class. Last not because he comes from the family of stupid people or the genetic line is for stupidity. I asked him, but what is happening? At least be average. Why are you the last, among the last students in class? He said, no, mommy, I know, I will tell you. And the boy sat with me and told me that, you know, we have learned values. In our prayer altar here, we have learned honesty, we have done truthfulness. When we were doing these 2 papers, the boys were cheating exams. And for me as a child of God, I could not cheat. I would have cheated and got 80 or 90 also, but I couldn't cheat. And when they did the averages, of course it affected me so much because everybody else got 90 something. And so I had to come down to 50s and he lowered my grades. So that is about teaching integrity and values right from home. The cost of corruption, the Salama Road. My student, Honorable MP Makindye West, I am glad to meet you and know that you're here attending this. Corruption fights corruption. And this is the reason why, as the Inspectorate of Government, we are saying give us money so that we can recover money. Corruption fights corruption. If the Inspectorate is not funded, we are not able to go out to monitor, to investigate, or do all the things we're talking about in our strategies. Corruption fights corruption. But now that you have brought it, when you identify corruption, we're talking about taking the fight to the people. Bring a case to us and we take it on. If it is already under our investigations, come and we take this conversation further because you need an update on the progress of the investigations. Because we don't just complete investigations like that. It takes a process to handle some of these cases. Big fish always slippery. The Inspector General of Government did mention this. Why is she saying the big fish are always slippery? I am not the Inspector General of Government. I am the deputy. But I will attempt to answer that. When we deal with the high-profile cases on corruption, you find that the high-profile people always try to cover their backs as much. You know, order from above. Nothing in writing. You will not see any commitment on his or her part that he instituted this. Then the technical person ends up to be the sacrificial lamb. So in most cases when we investigate this, you go to court and the technical person is saying, no, but it is the minister who told me. But it is the executive director, the CEO who told me this. But there is no evidence linking the CEO to that particular crime. So that is why we say the big fish are always slippery, and that's the reason why we probably have less cases of high-profile nature. But even small fish, one by one makes a bundle. If I can recover 400 million here, 300 million there, 100 million here, 45 here, 18 here, one by one makes a bundle. So if you put the mukenes together, you fill so many sacks. So we can handle it. The corruption is multidimensional and we require mindset change and a lot of teaching, awareness creation. But like I said, I think it all starts from home. If we can bring up responsible people, if we can encourage the other young parents to take time off to teach their children and do proper parenting, then I think we'll go a long way in dealing with this scourge of corruption. Thank you very much, and may God bless you.
Colleagues, allow me once again to thank Allow me, colleagues, to thank all the presenters, not just in this session, but for the whole day, for their thought-provoking presentation. I think the last session of the day was very, very important because we all know that corruption is a cancer that is eating our society today. You just have to check the statistics on corruption and then you understand why this session is important. I think about 140 billion in US dollars is lost in Africa due to corruption. I was just doing the conversion to Ugandan shillings. You will find that that is about 540 billion shillings, which is lost in Africa due to corruption. But the multi-million-dollar question probably that we have when it comes to this is, how do you teach ethics? I was going to ask the keynote presenter. We didn't have time for that. How do you build, how do you develop capacity for ethical leadership? How do you inculcate, values such as empathy? How do you build a public service with a human face? How do you build, how do you develop capacity within the public service for you to have a leadership with a human face, which can empathize with the people that the public service, seeks to serve? Because the public service is about the well-being of the people. But I think the biggest challenge is, how do you develop capacity for ethical leadership? Can we teach ethics? Can we inculcate humanness? And so on and so forth. But maybe we can have those discussions later on in the evening. So allow me to invite the Reverend to close for us the proceedings in a word of prayer. Over to you.
We have oversight. Let's stand and pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much that you have been with us this morning and you are faithful. As we disperse, we pray that you'll go with us, direct our thoughts, especially all that we have heard, churn out what is yours and remove what the chaff is ours. And so bless us and keep us safe, scatter all darkness, and make this institution an institution that will produce leaders worthy your name. And may he bless you and keep you. In the name of God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
The last thing that I want to say is, I've been told that we still have that tea we should have had around 3. It is being served downstairs. So we may go downstairs where we had lunch for us to have our tea. Thank you so much. Oh, you want to?
Yes, thank you very much. So tea is served where we had our lunch. We can go there and enjoy our tea. Sorry it is served late because of the busy day. And tomorrow let us please keep time because we also have a long day. Thank you for your patience.